Okay, you're live then.
No, it's still preparing to stream and setting up.
It's streaming live to me. It's telling me it's going live.
Okay, done. Almost done. Ritu, let me know whenever you can see it. Then I'll close my end of the window. Okay, I think we're live and we can officially begin. Okay, firstly, apologies everyone, some technical difficulties at Ungender Sent, and we finally got it fixed. We have gone live with Heather Saville joining us so gracefully from Bombay. She is the HR director at Lintas Group, and today we are going to talk all about HR leadership from a standpoint which many of the practitioners as well as team members, employees, individuals who have not really held these positions have a very little understanding of what it actually means when we talk about HR from a leadership perspective, building organizations culture and building teams and taking up the responsibility of not only attracting a diverse talent, but also ensuring that an inclusive culture is created for them to be able to stay, to be able to grow, to be able to feel that this is the workplace that we want to be part of. And yes, while a lot of individuals, different authorities in an organization, our peers and colleagues have a very important role to play. Nobody can take away the fact that everything flows from HR's desk and everything flows when HR creates these strategies. I welcome you here today, Heather. Thank you so much again for joining and taking out time to talk about this with me.
Very welcome. It's lovely to be here. I always love talking about the role of HR because, of course, you know, it's a role which people have strong opinions about, not always positive. I fell into HR by accident completely, so I kind of actually love the challenge of embracing that and sort of talking to people about the function. Thank you.
Let me take that thing. How did HR happen by accident?
I had previously been on the business side, so I was in advertising still. I've mainly been in the media space in the last many years, and I was in account management, so I was running businesses, developing advertising. Actually, I'd been in Thailand and London, then Thailand, then I was in Bombay. Mm-hmm. And I was an expat, which basically means that it's a big fancy job, a big fancy package, and all this kind of stuff happened. And then they asked me to leave the job and go to another country because the client was reorganizing. They said, don't worry, your job is there, but you have to leave Bombay. And I had absolutely fallen in love with India at this point, and I want to leave the country. So I said, it's okay, I'll quit and I'll find something else. It's okay, there are many companies and I'm young and I'll find something. So I actually decided to then go and have a meeting with the CEO of the company. This is actually the same company I'm working for now. So this is Lintas back in 2005. So I just thought I'd go meet him and tell him a few things about the company because I'd been there for a couple of years in the business role, and I wanted to go meet him and have a cup of tea with him. And I said, listen, you have no idea, but people are really stressed and not very happy, and this is a problem and that's a problem, everything else. So he said, why are you telling me all this? And I said, well, because somebody needs to know, and you're the CEO, right? And he said, yeah, I am. I said, okay, bye. He said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just staying in India. I'm going to find a job and hopefully something will come, all that optimism of youth. And he just looked at me and said, why don't you be my HR head? And my jaw hit the floor because in my mind, HR was this difficult, irritating, admin-y kind of function that just kept threatening to take my salary away for various different things. And I had no HR background whatsoever. So I was really blown away. And he said, yeah, only problem is it's not an expat job. So all the perks went out of the window. There was a massive salary cut. And I just thought, why not? So that was it. I was an overnight HR head at Lintas, VP HR back in 2000. Luckily, had a very, very strong team. I've always been lucky in my career to have very, very good teams working with me. So I walked in, I don't know how many, 12 or 10 people. who were all highly trained in HR, all very, very competent, all very excited, and a little nervous, I think, as was I. And it just worked. And that was 15 years ago.
Then
So yeah,
help me
completely
understand.
accidental. If I hadn't gone for that cup of tea, it would never have happened.
Yeah, actually, small incidents in our life, chance incidents, how they affect the whole trajectory of our lifetime. It's something that we only get to know in a hindsight or when we look back, right? But this is a more philosophical conversation. If you're into it, I'll catch you on this one also some other time. But coming back to the understanding of HR, right? Exactly the words that you said. That's exactly how a lot of people look at HR from a role, right? That they're there to check whether you have come to work or not, right? Mark your attendance. They're there to check how much money their company is paying you and how much they can save around that. They're always looking for the cheapest talent out there, which I don't believe is true at all. But sure, let people believe whatever they believe. They're always putting policies and things on paper, but not really concerned about whether things are manifesting or not. These are a lot of misconceptions. And since you started with one of those, right, in this entire journey, if we have to tell people, or if you yourself have to talk to yourself and say that this is what it means to be an HR leader, right, what would it be?
So I think the role of HR is to tread that very fine line between what the company needs and wants and what the employee needs and wants, right? It can't be either or, right? It has to be both. So it's a very tricky balancing act to do that. And one which really takes a lot of skill and practice, I believe, because it's very easy to do what the company wants. That's easy. It's easy to just listen to the employee and say, okay, you want a pay rise? Sure, have a pay rise. But the two things have to be in balance. So you're perpetually walking that balance between keeping everybody happy.
Yeah.
I feel the role of HR is to really glue the energy of the organization together. So we talk about culture, we talk about values, we talk about vision, and these are all things which are just words on paper.
Yeah.
Right. So another very important role is to make sure that all of that is actually expressed in terms of how we actually behave, and setting guidelines and encouraging people to walk those paths. And also working closely with senior management. Another very important role is being a foil to senior management, right? Or management at all. So management will go in one direction, and sometimes our role is to sort of like say, okay, just I have a view. Let me give you a perspective. I've been talking to people. Let me tell you how that sounds from X, Y, Z. So being that sort of voice of reason, if you like. So it's really being at the epicenter, sort of creating a whirlwind of cultural values, psychological safety, security, making sure everyone's voice is heard, mapping that with the company's needs, and constantly making sure that everything is on the right track.
Yeah, yeah. But in this whole conversation, wherein the balancing out, and I think that's a very apt description of an HR's role, right? What the company wants and what an employee wants. In this whole balancing act, how do we actually fit in the strategies here, right? Let's take one small example. I don't think a lot of leadership or the company ever says that we want diversity. Let's just start with that. I don't think any employee ever comes and says that, oh, I'm not working in a diverse team. I want diversity, right? So when you have to introduce this new concepts or ever existing concepts, but with now formal terms, right? Now, I don't think 30 years ago, 20 years ago, in the India Inc., we were talking about D&I in a very active manner. This conversation does not even exist. And over a period of time, this one word, this one phrase has entered the corporate boardrooms. But I still do not know. And it's not also very prevalent that companies are saying that we want diversity and we want inclusion. And either the employees are not saying that. How does being an HR leader, how does it feel when you have to tell both sides that maybe you don't know what you want and maybe you also don't know what you want and that's why you're not asking for it, but we know that this is needed. Right? How has this been for you when you have to balance certain concepts and especially around D&I? Being very selfish from the gender's angle, especially from the D&I side, how have you been able to introduce that?
So most employers are not going to look around them and say, this is not a diverse workforce, right? Everyone's too preoccupied, too busy in their thing. And only if you have a problem are you likely to speak out.
Yeah.
And the people who have a problem, who feel that perhaps they're being discriminated against, need to feel it's a safer environment to do so, right? So most of the time, this isn't heard. So we, as HR, we have to take a broader perspective. Now, we've actually begun a very exciting journey at the Mullen Lintas Group. It's been going on for some years, probably the last decade, but it's really accelerated this past year. Mm-hmm. We ran a very strong Pride awareness campaign in Pride Month, very, very strong, and we introspected a lot. We actually sat down, we did not only panel discussions with external speakers, but we actually examined our own policies. We've set up a diversity committee full of passionate people who are either allies or parts of the community who are really digging deep into everything we do. Mm-hmm. Because we have to provide that framework, right? And if we don't do it, then nobody else is going to do it, right? I mean, one lone employee may try, but unless the machinery of the organization is behind you and with you, it's unlikely to happen. So we are putting a lot of priority on that piece, and happily, our senior leadership are absolutely aligned to that vision. Mm-hmm. If they were not, I would personally have a problem, frankly, but because that's a values-orientated perspective. But we're absolutely aligned, and I think that Pride activity we did for that 1 month really just opened our eyes in that space. And obviously, gender has been a big thing for us. The first thing I did when I came into the organization for the second time, about 2 years ago, was I did an analysis of all of our data. 600, 700 employees, every level, every single salary. I did benchmarking to just to see, are we actually paying people equally? And I found to my delight that we were. There was absolutely no difference whatsoever. And I was like, wow, we actually have no salary discrimination at all. So then I said, okay, it was amazing. But then I said, okay, that's fine. What about the numbers? So I crunched and looked into the data, and I found out that the story there wasn't quite so happy. We do have, and I think this is true of probably most companies, particularly in India, where what you see is we actually have a very female heavy skew at the bottom end. A lot of women coming into the industry, which is nice, particularly at low levels. Then it sort of goes to about 50-50. It sort of evens out, which is absolutely fine. And then what you see is a large turn towards the other way. And my assertion is that what happens is that when women get to a certain age and stage, they end up having to make choices. In this company, in the next advertising agency, in the next media company, in any company probably, particularly in India, where it's kind of tough and you're dealing with a culture which is also quite challenging to navigate sometimes as well, right? I mean, even things like daycare are not as advanced as you'd find in the West. You know, after school clubs don't exist here. I mean, there's a lot of ways that it's easier in the West to sort of be a woman with a child, right? So there's a lot of reasons, but we found this sort of had dropped off. And a lot of the industry was about when we were not working from home, when we were in the office, was about coming late, staying late, jamming ideas, that sort of dynamic. And that excluded a lot of women who need to get home for their children. And I say women, not because I'm being sexist, but because as a mother, I know that it's often the woman who takes the majority of that emotional load of organizing stuff and the schoolwork and this and that and the parties and everything else. So it is often the woman in that position. And so we were actually beginning to do a lot of work around that, looking at flexible working hours. Ironically, we were trying to get people to use Microsoft Teams as an online platform, just to get people more flexible. And we were facing a lot of challenge where everyone was too busy to learn it. And then, of course, work from home happened, and overnight everybody became very fluent in these various technological portals. So the whole debate has now changed. But yeah, I think it's very, very important to come back to the original question. HR has to be the guiding light in these areas, right? We have to also understand that even managers and leaders, everybody wants to have a diverse environment, right? Everybody wants to be representative. We create advertising. We need to create diverse stories, right, for our consumers. But everyone's busy. Everyone's running at 1,000 miles an hour, trying to hold the business up and deliver for the clients and all of this kind of thing. Nobody's got time to sit and think, oh, and what about the diversity policy? That's what we have to do.
Yeah, but it becomes challenging, right, Heather? Because, so for example, pay parity is one thing, right? Looking at a simple data around inclusion, and I'll separate the word diversity from women inclusion right now, just so that we can keep clearing the understanding of what it means to be diverse. It's not just about hiring more women in your team, right? If you have to just look at from an HR lens, that when you scan an organization, how do you even begin to understand that we are diverse or not?
So I guess there are hard and soft measures, right? There are the hard measures of the numbers. Do I have representation across every single category that I can possibly think of? Do I have it in my office, right? That's the hard stuff. The softer stuff is, what kind of culture do I have? Do I have a culture which is psychologically safe, as they call it, where people can express themselves? Where if I want to dress in a certain way, I can dress in a certain way. Yeah. Where if I'm not able-bodied, I can actually be welcomed in the organization. I can actually sort of live and be quite without any stress to myself. Do I have a culture that uses certain words which are derogatory freely? Because if I do, I shouldn't have, right? Do I have an environment where I feel that I can actually raise an issue if I feel that I've been experiencing something which is really not okay?
Yeah.
So we have to look at both ends of that. And we've done a lot of work, particularly in the softer side, which is harder to get a hold of.
Harder to do, actually. How did you do that? Because that's a challenge which a lot of companies, whenever we engage with an organization, and we're also running this list of the inclusive and diverse companies to work for. When people reach out and they say that, okay, we want to know which companies are hiring and which companies we will not have to do this test drive with. Everyone wants to be part of a team where they will feel safe and accepted. When we start this conversation with organizations, usually it begins with asking them whether you even know what kind of diversity you have, right? And it could be anything. You can have more women in your team. You can have more people from the trans community. You can identify people with special ability, people with disability. Even in that, you can further segment it, and so on and so forth. But like you said, this is still something that can come out in data. How those people, how those individuals are feeling, how their experience is in the organization is very subjective, right? How does a leader go about even gauging into that? Because the most common practice is, oh, we ask everybody and everyone says everything is fine.
Of course they will.
It's a lazy and a very flawed approach. There's no other way for this. But how do you go about strategically looking at this, Heather? How did you go about identifying where is inclusion higher, where it is missing some, hinges? What are the gaps that can be identified? And then I'll ask you next how you fix them.
So when you say that asking people is kind of a lazy way, it depends how it's done.
Okay, let me clarify. Sorry.
But that's one of the strategies which so if you throw out a survey, that's.
No, I just wanted to correct that part. When I say asking one or two people just during a cafeteria or a smoking break, that how was your experience?
Yeah, are you fine? Yes. Okay, fine. Tick. That's very lazy.
That's what I meant when I said that that's a lazy approach, because your sample size is not enough. You're not documenting anything. You don't have any structure to these conversations. So thank you for pointing that out for everyone's sake. That is not what I was referring to. Please go ahead.
But to that point about talking to people, that is one of the major approaches that we take as an HR team. So every 3 months, we speak to everybody in the organization between us.
See, that definitely is not lazy.
No, my team, some of them are on this call. I'm sure they're all behind their screens like, no. Everyone has to call at least 50 people, right? Yeah. So we keep connecting with people. It used to be face-to-face. Now, of course, it's not. And through those conversations, we build trust. We position ourselves as a very externally focused, outgoing kind of HR team who people can, and all kinds of things come up. And then we filter the things which are just people having a good old moan, which is absolutely fine as well. And things actually which are a little bit concerning, which we then pull out. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we've been doing, a lot of these issues are very gray areas, right? So when it comes to language in particular, when it comes to how we use language, the kind of banter we have in the office, perhaps, it's very gray area. So we had started pulling together groups of 15, 20, 25 people together in a very informal way in the morning and just having an open conversation around this. And they would go into all sorts of directions because, some of the language we use, particularly, I mean, I'm saying India because I've been here for 17 years and I've not worked anywhere else for a long time, but I think there's lots of slurs which one hears and people say that person, and I mean, they're quite sort of like, I don't know, I don't want to say them here, but there's language which we use.
All of us know what
you all know, right? Yeah, and often it's linked to the color of skin. I mean, even if you hear something like, yeah, that dark guy, that dark one, right? I mean, that is really offensive in itself because you're not talking about the person's skin color. You're putting a whole judgment there, right? So language, the way we talk to people, the way we address them. I mean, I've had interns coming to me and saying, is it okay if the client calls me babe on a WhatsApp message? And I'm like, no, it's not okay. And they're like, okay, I wasn't sure. And then we take action and we sort of make sure we educate the client as well. So I think those two ways of doing things, because when you're dealing with different generations, right, you've got perhaps 3 different generations under one roof, maybe even 4. You're dealing with people who've been in advertising since maybe the 80s or even the 70s. You're dealing with people who are brand new, fresh out of college, right? It's changed drastically in that time. So you've got to make sure that you're bringing people with you on this journey, that you're challenging, you're opening up, you're not being seen as over radical because then you just lose people, but you're really sensitizing people to how we can collectively come together and build the right kind of language cues and behavior.
Yeah, but these are deep-rooted issues, right, Heather? And we are talking about individual profiles, people like yourself. We are talking about individual. When you want to build a diversity, it comes with its own baggage. That means that nobody will think the same way. More and more different ways of looking at the world around you will be there. And that will all reflect in the biases that people bring forward. How has been your experience? Because I remember this was one. I mean, there's so many amazing things that that have happened at Lintas Group under your leadership. But when it comes to addressing bias at different levels, right? How exactly have you approached it? What has been the structure and strategy?
So I think we try to make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place. So for example, let's take an example of recruitment, right? We hire a lot of people. Oh, well, we were hiring a lot of people. Right now we're a bit of a pause, but we generally hire quite a lot of people. Now, the first step is making sure that your pipeline of candidates are balanced, right? So that is in our control, my team's control, right? So we make sure that we are genuinely being unbiased. And if we feel there may be a bias, we would always challenge ourselves because there's conscious and subconscious bias, right? Yeah. Interviewing is exactly the same. We all want to hire people like us. That's how we behave as human beings, right? So we have to make sure those unconscious biases don't come in. So then we have a pool of people at our level, who we know are good candidates, and they will be a mixed bunch of people. Then we put those people out into the world, so to speak, i.e. we go and give them to the business head or whoever's interviewing them. Now there's the next place where bias can kick in, right? Now, we know these candidates and we know these people. So if we feel that there is a judgment being made, which could be an unconscious bias, we would challenge that. So where there are 2 equal candidates and someone's leaning on one side and we feel there's something that perhaps might be a little bit off, then we would go in and challenge that. I've had people in the past, not in this company, I have to say, genuinely, but in other companies, tell me, Araya, hire a man. I want only a man for this role. And I'm like, why? No, this late night working, I need a man. And I'm like, I'm sorry, no, that's absolutely not okay. Because I also come from a background and a country where discrimination on the basis of sex or age is illegal, right? So you cannot even ask a person's age in the UK. You're not allowed to do that. It's illegal. Yeah. You certainly can't ask a woman, do you think you might be planning to start a family soon? Because, that could be a problem for us, which I've also heard people ask, right? So it shocks me. And I'm sure it shocks many people as well. So we have our certain sort of standards and codes. But I have to say, I mean, I'm not just speaking positively about this company because I work for Lintas, but I've worked at this company now 3 times, right? First as the business head, second as the HR head then, and now I've come back. So there's something there which keeps pulling me back. Yeah. It is genuinely an organization which has very, very clear values of integrity. And where those values sometimes get compromised and challenged with incidences that happen, we take very clear and decisive action. And that sends a message out to everybody else. So the handful of times I've had to deal with issues in the last couple of years, it's been done very, very supportively and very clearly in terms of the action. So it's all very well to talk and have these like highfalutin policies, but action has to follow through to make sure that people are actually protected.
That's true. That's true. So, do you invest in bias addressal programs and putting people through these journeys of identifying their biases and then getting them to manage it? Because eventually, while you are monitoring all this process very close net, and the whole team is devoted to this, these people have to eventually work under them, right? And I know you're complementing it with regular conversations repeatedly just to make sure they know that HR is here. But these bias addressal programs, which are pretty prevalent in the companies as leadership management and managers development programs, have you considered them, or have they actually been part of the major strategic interventions?
We haven't done any specific bias programs yet, but I want to. And we were talking about it, in fact, and around, I think, January of this year. We do challenge biases through our POSH programs. So when we run the POSH training, which is mandatory, of course, legally, we actually take it into another space as well. So we do the whole legal piece, which is what this is the law, this is the committee, this is this, this is that. And then we spend a lot of time talking about, as I said, the gray areas, and bias comes into it as well. So we cover these areas because we've opened up people's minds in a certain way, and then we actually follow through with very specific conversations around this.
Right.
But I would like to go deeper with that work and actually perhaps make it in small groups or maybe even one-on-one, that we go quite deeply into these biases, because often they're not even known to the person. I mean, subconscious bias is not something which is known, right? It just happens to be there. So yeah, I definitely would like to do some more work in that space.
How do you suggest, Heather, for all those organizations and especially HR proactive leaders, and I know a lot of them, who have identified certain needs, certain strategic interventions which are to be there, certain activities that need to be conducted, but everything is a cost. And when the understanding or appreciation for D&I activities is not there, this cost looks like an expenditure, whereas it is an investment, right? How do you suggest that shift can happen? What are, let's say, one or two things as a pilot that can be done to create that business case for investment in these activities?
So there are many angles one can take. I mean, first off, we fight a lot of battles to make things happen, right? That's what a lot of what HR does. It's that nobody thinks that money grows on trees, right? We all know that money is sort of like, and whatever budgets we have, whether it be for leadership development, whether it be for engagement activities, whether it be for, I don't know, give away food in the canteen, whatever, it has to be done with some bigger picture in mind.
Yeah.
Right. So you always have to link it back to whether it's about enhancing employee engagement through making people feel happier and more productive. They feel therefore more productive. They release more discretionary effort because they feel so much happier. And that therefore, I mean, research has shown that leads to enhanced working performance and therefore business results. There are myriad studies, right? We can also argue from the same perspective that diverse communities, by definition, will create better communication, right? If, I mean, to use the analogy of straight white men, right? I mean, it's not straight white men, but if you're looking at the American straight white men, writing communication for women, right? It doesn't work. I mean, it can work, but we also need diverse teams to come together to an idea is created, it's thrown around, it's looked at from different angles, people come at it. There's a whole process, right? So if I only have one section of society throughout that entire process, by definition, my idea is going to be less rich.
Yeah.
right? So I will create, what do we do as an advertising agency? We create communication. That's what we do. We don't own anything. You know, we don't own buildings, we don't own factories, we don't own anything. We just rely on the power of our ideas.
Yeah.
Now we can only create powerful ideas with diverse communities. So it's a no-brainer that at a macro level, the argument for diversity is very clear. Then you drill down into, look, you know, we can spend crores and crores of rupees on this stuff and throw money at it, or we can actually just figure out a really smart strategy. So we would go in and we would, for example, if I was running, I don't know, a sensitization program, I would look at the alternatives out there. I would make sure that I spoke to people who'd been through them. I would take testimonials. I would make sure that whatever we were paying for was done with as much intelligence as possible. So do all of that sort of hard work. Like if I was hiring a trainer for a leadership program, I would not just blindly hire a trainer and say, here's money. I would want to make sure that that was the best person I could get for what I needed, right? So all of that diligence and hard work has to be done, because the finance guys, the CFO, he understands this is all stuff that needs to happen, but he's also looking at his bottom line, right? And I'm literally eating into his bottom line. So at some level, he wants to see that that's going to contribute to the top line, which is the revenue. So we can, once we talk the language of business and understand the pressures and understand how ideas are created as HR people, then we have a good chance of actually then getting investment back into what we do.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next one. Every organization, whenever they start investing in it, especially the bias addressal, they want to eliminate bias, but that's impossible. It's almost like teach humans to stop breathing, or it's very inherent part of the existence. But yes, there are certain biases which are actually pretty toxic in organizations, and certain things need to be taught to be managed. Um, any insights on when you, even if not from an external source, however, you have invested in the whole bias addressal and bias management? Any key learnings from there, Heather, that you realize that, okay, this is what was creating some bottleneck? This particular bias was not letting things manifest in the inclusion space as they should have in its natural course. Any three learnings that you would like to share for, once again, HR leaders to take back home and then say that, hey, do I even have this? How do you identify? So three biases that you can, one you have already named, affinity bias. I think that's the easiest thing to look like, if I've hired all the people that I already knew in the past, or if I'm hiring people who are like me, right? And then something which is just there on your face. Other two kinds of biases, and how you would say that an HR leader can immediately identify them if they are not able to go through a very structured approach of looking at them.
So there's one area, I'm not sure it's a bias, it may well be, but this, what I call this macho work culture. So there's this whole culture which has actually reduced. If I look at my Lintas time, I've got sort of a decade apart, right? So I can sort of compare then and now. And if I look back at then, in the whole of advertising, this is before Me Too and before, we're talking about early 2000s, right? There was a very prevalent macho culture. And I remember that, for example, people would go to the pub or the bar or whatever to crack an idea, right? Now you go to the pub to crack an idea, that may be okay for some women. I mean, I certainly used to do that when I was advertising 20 years ago in London, but there are also women who don't feel comfortable with that kind of environment, right? There are women who need to get home for various reasons, and that therefore can be quite an exclusive kind of a setup. So I remember having conversations, and it was then, and it was probably in companies after that as well, trying to bust this whole macho culture. Like, I work hard, I play hard, I drink hard, I sit in the office, people saying, I've slept in the office today. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's terrible. What do you want? And then I'm working so hard. And so the macho culture is a big one. And I mean, I've got a personal one that I used to come to the office 6 months ago. I used to reach the office by 8:30 in the morning. And the office was empty, right? Because nobody else gets in. I mean, very few people would come in at 9 and 9:30. You'd see the finance team and then the admin team, and then a few very, very sort of early birds would sort of be popping up. But most people would sort of come in pretty late. And I would leave by 5 because I wanted to leave by 5 because by the time I'd sat in the traffic for an hour-ish, and then I could actually see my kids. 5 would always become 6, but that's okay. I'd still be home in time to see my kids and read them a bedtime story, right? Because they're young. Now, I'd agreed this with my boss, and it was part of the discussion I had when I was hired. This is how I'm going to work, and everything. It was like, yes, that's absolutely perfect. You can do that. I was like, great, what a progressive company. Walk out at 5 o'clock of an advertising agency anywhere in India. I guarantee you, people will go, they look at their watches, and they're like, oh, you're leaving? And I'm like, yeah. Oh, okay. Have a nice evening. Now that's a bias, right? Because first of all, I've been in the office probably 3 hours before them in the morning. And I don't feel that I should have to stand up and justify myself. But that feeling inside is I feel like I need to say something like, oh, I've been here since. I'm not going to go into that defensive space, right?
Yeah.
You can come in at 11 o'clock and have your chai and wake up and do everything else, and that's okay. But for women who need to leave for a very specific reason, and trust me, we leave that office, I would get in my car. I was fortunate enough to have a driver. I would ping my laptop open and I'd be working all the way home.
Yeah.
I'd put it away, spend time with my kids, put them to bed, and back on my laptop. Right. But that makes people feel very uncomfortable. And imagine it's me, the head of HR. And it's this subtle, like a glance at the watch. An eyebrow will go up. Oh, okay, good night, good evening, have a nice evening.
Have fun.
Have fun. And I'm like, right, I'm going home to put my kids to bed, and then I'm going to pop my laptop open. What fun can I have? And if I'm lucky, I might squeeze in some Netflix show that I'm watching at some whatever time of night. Yeah, so that's a massive bias, because first of all, as a woman, if you've taken a year or two out to have a child, you're fortunate enough that you found a job to come back to, which is also another whole story in itself. You anyway feel underconfident. You've got to manage your time to actually go home and take care of your family. And then you're getting, and by the way, this is not just from men, huh? This is from men and women, both.
Both.
Yeah, it's not, I'm not just saying it's men. It's probably, I mean, it could even be women with children. I don't know, but it goes right across. But, you know, that kind of bias, or a young mother who's come back after the child is 6 months, because now you get 6 months. When I had my kids, it was 3 months. You get 6 months, you come back, it's all still a bit difficult. You know, pregnancy and birth is a very difficult experience, and particularly difficult for some people. And you're expected to function at 100% on day one.
Yeah.
You know, let's be a little empathetic, right? Let's give people a little time to get back up to speed. It takes time. And I'm guilty. I had to check myself, because you'll ask my team. I have very high standards for myself and my team. And I can be and then I'm like, oh, hang on a second. I'm also being as bad as, you know, people around me. I have to check myself, right? There's work, there's urgency, there's business, there's pressure, and there's humanity, right? And having to juggle everything. So we just have to open our mouths and push back when we feel we need to.
No, that's actually pretty subtle, but it's at the same time, for the receiver, it's not that it's subtle, it's on their face.
It's like you've been slapped. I mean, and it happens all the time. And I don't know if men would get it as much. I mean, I don't know, because I am not a man, I've not experienced it, and nobody's ever shared it with me. But yeah, I've actually sort of felt myself kind of blushing and just wanting to say, as I say, to be defensive and tell them, but I came in at 8:30. Why should I get into that space of having to defend myself, right? And I'm the head of HR. Imagine everybody else down the line who's also trying to do the same thing and feeling like, or people will say, no, you can't leave yet. I mean, they don't say it to me, but they might say to somebody else, no, I need you to work on this brief. Or there's a meeting at 7 p.m.
Yeah. I mean, the same conversation going around the whole period leave, right? While a lot of people may not be able to, well, let me just ask you, why hear my thoughts? What's your take?
On period leave? Yeah. I'm actually not a supporter of it. I'll tell you why. I think the bigger, deeper issues are about making sure that we're focusing on getting equal representation at senior levels, right? Creating leaders, creating mentors, making sure we have cultures where women don't feel they have to make choices between being in the office and taking care of their families, right? These are the issues. I think, see, of all women, not everybody suffers every month, right? Some do, some don't. Some have a very, very, very bad time. Some women barely even notice, actually.
Yeah.
So I would rather create an organization and a culture where anybody who needs help or support or time off is encouraged in that. So why only period leave? What about mental health leave? Right now, our mental health is in crisis across the world, right? Every organization is facing issues of people burning out, because work from home doesn't mean work from home and then shut your laptop and have a nice balanced life. It means there's another meeting and another meeting, because you're just there, right? You can't say, no, I'm traveling, or I'm on a flight, or I'm here, I'm there. So I would rather make sure that we had the kind of environment, which is what we are working towards, is this HR team, with our leadership, of saying, look, whatever support you need, whether you have a family member who's sick, whether you are sick, whether you just don't want to get out of bed in the morning, whether you're stressed about something, whether you're having a bad period this month, whatever, whether you need surgery for fibroids, whether you XYZ thing, we're there to support you.
So basically, inclusion at a level wherein you don't really need to dig deeper into anybody's personal life. It could be.
Why should I like tell everybody I want my period leave? Then I just don't think it helps. It helps matters. I know that if I say to anybody, male or female, I'm taking the day off, I have a really bad stomach ache, they're gonna probably know what I'm talking about. And if they don't, I don't care. I'll take the day and I'll do what I need to do. But I think most people get that now. So I just think it's.
Yeah. I had a friend who used to make one excuse or the other every month during her periods, and eventually the team members started saying that this person is always unwell, like an irresponsible person. But I get what you're saying, right? That at the core or at the DNA of an organization, if you can create a space for everybody to be able to, one, become a responsible team member of the organization. That means that you don't have to monitor them. You don't have to, the distrust does not allow you to say that, oh, somebody is not telling me the reason for their leave. Maybe they're just going for a vacation, or maybe they're just having fun, or maybe they just don't want to come to work. So first, become a workplace where your team members want to come, and they
be a leader where your team members actually want to open up to you. I would hope that the team members I have on this call, I can see all their names, but they're hiding behind their cameras. I would hope that all of them would feel that they could come to me and say, listen, I'm having a problem. I would hope. They could tell you something else, because you create an environment for your people. You can't affect the entire organization. HR can try, but if you're a business head, you affect that one team.
Yeah.
And you have eyesight over that team, right? So you need to put yourself out there as a leader of those people, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, whatever, that you are somebody who they can come to if they have a problem.
That's true. How does, there's a subtler aspect here when we talk about promotions, right? You have taken care of the hiring and attracting the talent, and when people are becoming, or they're showing the intent to be part of this company. But promotions and growth is a different ballgame altogether. Right? Here I want to go into the appraisal process a little bit.
Sure.
How are you going about handling the bias that manifests when you're recommending somebody either for promotion, important projects, because these same conversations from period to pregnancy to just being a woman, or and sticking only to the cis woman part here. How are you gauging this particular set of biases, Heather, and how are you managing them?
So our appraisal process is a fairly structured one. So it happens, ideally it happens every year. It's been slightly hijacked this year, not surprisingly, but We have a pretty robust process where we have forms and people fill them in and people sit and we communicate very clearly to people how it all works. And then as HR, we take a very active interest in looking at those forms. I mean, I read every form, which is some 600 forms, and we also look at the data. So we do a little bit of bell curving, not too much, because then you try to force fit people and it becomes a bit of a mockery, but you just look for patterns and trends. So where you have one department who perhaps has given everybody an A+ rating, which is the top rating, and then you'll go in and have a conversation with that person and dig a little bit underneath and find out what's going on. Sometimes people want to please their people, right? Sometimes people are very tough taskmasters. Sometimes people have unconscious biases.
Yeah.
So we try and pick up. Now, as HR, we also have opinions, right? We know, because we have conversations with people a lot. We're constantly talking to people. We're constantly reaching out. We're constantly putting our HR noses in, much to the annoyance of some people. But that's the way we are. That's the way I am. And my team are also learning to be that way. Because our job is not just to say, okay, that's fine. Our job is to say, hang on a second. You're not promoting this person. Now she's been here for X number of years. I know that she's done X, Y, Z. Why are you not promoting her? Let's have a conversation. No, she's just told me she wants to start a family. Okay, so why are you not promoting her? No, because no, it's okay, I can. No, but let's get deeper into this conversation. Let's actually take this conversation head on. The easy way is to go, okay, I get it, right? Particularly when we're intimidated by business leaders. But actually, we need to dig and push and be that little bit annoying thorn in the side, right? Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah.
We can be generous and we can pay salaries and we can give promotions. We can also be a little bit difficult, right? And say, actually, no. We need to have a conversation about this.
Has there ever been a conflict from this stance? Because I'm picking up a question here, which Ritu has asked, that when we talk about recommendation, right, crucial part of HR referral process, there's a lot of bias also that manifests there.
Isn't recommendation referral process? You mean recommending people for jobs, right?
Yes.
So our policy is that anybody can make any recommendation of a person for a job. They have to send, the resume has to be routed through us, as an HR. Then, of course, we have various things in place like relatives can't interview each other and they can't report to each other and so on. But we're very clear about being a very merit-based organization. So I've had people send me resumes for internships, for example. This is the son of my client. He wants to be an intern. I'm like, okay, great. So we'll chat to him. And if he fits the criteria, then we'll consider him. No, but he's my client, right? So you'll do. I said, I will hire him if he meets the criteria for the role. So even if we have very important people in our lives and we need to keep those very important people happy, we always, and this is supported right the way up to senior management. So we always make that clear. When I receive a resume, I always make it clear. Even if I don't think that's being asked, I always make sure there's no ambiguity. So we have a very, very clear system. And once we put that young person in for interview, we won't tell the interviewer that, by the way, this is we just say, please meet this person. This is the role, this is the resume, please meet this person. So we make sure that there can never be any power or influence or nepotism, or none of that can come into play. And as an IPG company, we are a part of a global network, IPG. IPG is very, very, very hot on all of this diversity and inclusion, bias. We have to all go through this training every single year, which gets reported back to our global center, which helps us distinguish these exact kind of gray areas. So it goes through role play. You get to play out different scenarios. It tells you, nope, oops, you've been biased. You're like, ooh, oops, because it takes you through a live, online video scenario, right? So it actually throws out all those biases. So it's a little fun. It's kind of gamified, but it's very meaningful as well.
So it's good, because when humans tell you are biased, we start arguing. So as long as we are able to listen and learn from programs and conversations like this, it's important to learn. It doesn't matter where that learning is coming from. So many wonderful practices, Heather. And I have two very crucial questions that I wanted to ask, but let me first go to the pressing need that each and every HR leader is actually struggling with right now. COVID-19, work from home. what have been the challenges, especially as a creative agency,
Mm.
when it came to the transition part, right? And I'm sure that you must have identified some gaps, some struggles, especially with your regular conversations with the team members. What were some of the practices that you introduced during this work from home thing? And which ones are you planning to continue forward with?
Mm.
Because for some companies, this is just a stopgap solution, interim. But what have been the good practices, some of them that you have adopted, and which ones are you planning to actually continue with?
So actually, the transition itself was very straightforward. One day we
Hmm.
were all in the office, Friday, I think it was March the 14th or something like that. Monday the 17th, we were all at home. It was like zip, one weekend, and it just happened. So that we prepared for it by sending, see, we work on these not only laptops, but our designers work on these enormous iMac machines, right? They're like massive. So we already got all of those shipped to our designers' homes. We got all
Okay.
that done. So literally overnight, we were, and this work from home, this COVID thing has actually been a journey, right? It's like the 5 steps of change, or the 8 steps of change. Actually, the 5 steps of grief, or whatever. Everyone's going through this journey, right? So at the beginning, it was like, yay, आज छुट्टी है, wow, wow, wow. It was like, we have holiday, we're at home, yeah. And everybody was actually like kind of loving it. And we would sort of do our kind of meetings, and we were like, oh, we're using this technology, and oh, it's all very exciting. So that lasted for probably the first kind of month. Now, we knew, or I felt that this was going to end up, I mean, because I know a little bit about human psychology and behavior and human nature, and I could see that this was going to go from that happy space. So we took a lot of effort very early on. As I say, we did a survey very early on, just to kind of gauge people's feelings. How was it been for you to go straight to work from home? And a lot of positivity was coming through. We did the reach outs. We put as much of our wellness stuff online as we could. So we do thrice weekly yoga classes. We do Samba online. We do Zumba online. We do meditation, all kinds of things. That's continued. We
Mm-hmm.
also did some initiatives called Chai and Chat, where the CEO and senior leaders would have chai behind their screens, obviously, with younger people in the organization, and just talk about stuff which was on their minds. We did a lot of that.
Right.
We've done various initiatives all the way through. We've put all our training online. So we're doing leadership programs for our younger people, which we're running internally. We're doing a massive digital upskilling program called DNA, which has all gone online. We just finished it's a 9-day program. We've customized it. So instead of taking people away for a week, we've made it half days so people can actually manage work from home. We are towards the end of a mental health month this month. So this whole of August has been focused on mental health awareness, telling people it's okay to talk about it, alongside the reach outs, which we keep doing, encouraging people to come forward. We have a mental health counsellor who's available to all our employees. We have a doctor available. We have funding for hospitalization if required. I mean, all kinds of things. So, and we've in fact announced a holiday for the company on Friday, just to say, you know what, everybody, just take a breather. Because people are just not able to find that balance, right? So we're very, very conscious and mindful that people are getting stretched from all directions. And the other big thing, of course, is that some of us who are fortunate enough to have spare rooms and good air conditioning and strong Wi-Fi are forgetting that that's not the same for everybody. Right, some people are living in very cramped spaces with lots of family members. How do you manage all of this when you've got people running around and you can barely have space for yourself, let alone to do meetings? People don't have AC. It's very, very difficult for them. So I think we just have to be very mindful of the fact that it's tough for a lot of people, and be a little bit supportive.
It is, and uh, there's a lot of push towards creating work from home policies also, because um, earlier people were visible, they were in front of you. If there's a conflict, you can identify, even if it's non-verbal, you can identify that. But in a work from home situation, it's very, very difficult to be there on the spot, no matter how reactive you are.
Mm.
Um, And that brings me to a very crucial aspect of HR leaders' role. There's always this debate that policies versus culture, right? Writing policies for each and everything, it is tedious, it's time consuming. And I hear a lot of leaders say that we don't need policies for everything. As long as it's part of our culture, we will ensure that. Right now, at my end, of course, I have a counter argument to this. But with your experience and everything that you have created at Lintas Group, what's your take on this, Heather? The importance of putting policies, and you can completely reject it also, right? Because you have your own approach as a leader.
Sure.
Why is it important to put things on paper? Why is it important to put things in the form of policies and processes?
So that's a really good question. In fact, I was always a very anti-policy person. I'm not a very compliant type, so I would always kind of like be the one who was fighting against the policies pre-HR days. Now I've really come to understand, see, without that framework and set of guidelines, then you can go very badly wrong, right? So policy should never be used as an absolute, right? They should be used to guide us. They should be used to make sure that that we have a system which is very fair across the organization. So if I don't have a policy in place, for example, about leave. Now I know, let's take the Netflix example. Netflix has zero policy around leave. You can take as much leave as you want to when you need it, right? That's a very evolved kind of a policy, right? I would love to get to that situation. But in reality, not everyone is able to even take a week's leave because there's just too much work happening. So it's our job to actually make them take leave. It's not the other way around, right? So I need a policy that says, look, there are 20 days of holiday a year, plus your public holidays, plus your sick leave, plus your casual leave, plus your whatever, because that is my benchmark. Now, if I have a person who's taken 5 days in a year, every day, every year for the last 10 years, then there's a problem. Because the guideline says you should be taking 4 weeks a year for rest and recuperation. If I have somebody that every year is taking 60 days a year, then I have another problem because that's not fair to other people.
Right.
When I have a policy, I always tell my team as well, look, policy says this, what do we feel is right? So policies should always be taken with a certain amount of instinct and deviated from if required. So I always tell people say to me, oh, the policy says we can't take leave in the first 6 months. I'm like, sure. That's to make sure that, broadly speaking, that you don't join the company and in the second week disappear off to Bali for 2 weeks. That's fair. But if you need a holiday or you need a reason for taking leave in the first 6 months, for whatever reason, you talk to us and we'll say, sure. Absolutely, we'll take it from the leave that's coming, not a problem, but you communicate with us. So everything is on a case-to-case basis. And we're very flexible in that way. All I ask is that people should communicate with us. But I'm not one to throw the leave book at people ever. It's there for a very good reason. Otherwise, we'd be literally living in chaos. But everything written in that book, unless it's legal or ethical or, really can't be transgressed, and is really black and white. Most other things are, subject to a little bit of interpretation. Let's openly communicate. Let's talk about what you need. When I've paid people, when they've taken like 5-6 months off, I've paid them because they've had really serious medical issues to deal with, for example.
Right.
So we balance what the policy says, which should technically be no salary after a month, with the compassion we feel for that person and those conversations we've had.
Oh, so policies, what I'm concluding is policies are critical.
Policies are critical, but they should never be seen as the holy grail. There always been.
I always simplify it for those individuals who can take the humor. Think of it as pizza base. You want to have pizza, get the pizza base at least. You can change the toppings, you can modify it as per but you need it. It's a crucial element for your organization to even begin planning anything that you want to plan. Even for any kind of culture that you want to create, you can always play around with the policies. You can bend them, mend them, modify them in times to come.
But you need them. Like any country would have would have laws, right? You can't live in it. You can't live in anarchy and chaos. I mean, some people choose to, and they go off the beaten track and do their own thing, and that's okay. But like, you can't just walk into a shop and murder somebody and get away with it, right? Rightly so.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just take something off the shelf of a shop and walk out with it, and rightly so. Right. Those frameworks exist to keep us in ethical and legal and moral in the right space, right? And just the same, there are legal government-led policies which we can't deviate from, but even when we create our own policies for the company, they're there to actually create those frameworks of behavior for people to make sure that we're all operating in about the right space. But if you need to operate outside that space for good reason, then talk to us.
No, that's true. I think I'm done with all my questions. There are two on my plate right now. I'll share the first one with you. Someone has asked that for an HR, all these learnings that you're talking about, right? And everyone has, from an HR perspective, you're always thinking about what the organization needs to learn, what the leadership needs to learn now, which team needs to learn what now, from a soft aspect or from a hard skill aspect. Who's thinking for HR leader? And since nobody is, how do you even begin? Right? Because it's not just about identifying, it's putting yourself under the lens and asking yourself that what is it that I don't know, right? And then second, you also have to create a cost allocation internally for the same, from the same budget that has been given towards expenses on the organization. So how do you go about that? What do you have to say, Heather?
So I'm somebody who's very focused on my own learning personally. I am also involved with a lot of networks, so for example, I'm a trained coach, and I'm also involved in a lot of coaching networks that share a lot of information about various courses and various, so I'm constantly swimming in the sea of like learning opportunities, right? And I'm always plucking out. I mean, I'm right now at my age doing a postgraduate study in HR degree from the UK, which is probably like, I don't know, 20 years too late, but I'm doing it because I just think it's a fun thing to do, right? It's tough. I mean, I'm having to balance, I'm working every night till late, I'm working every weekend, I've got exams coming up, and it has to be alongside work, but I'm loving it, right? And I think that's something which is required for me. It's putting the method behind the madness of the last 15 years and teaching me some stuff that perhaps I didn't know the theory behind. And a lot of it, you ask about budgets. I mean, a lot of it I fund myself. So you know, I trained to be a coach. I paid for that myself because that's for me, right? I mean, of course it helps in my work. Of course I use those coaching skills internally. Of course I have conversations, but ultimately I'm the one who may end up benefiting from that in the long term, as and when I decide to perhaps be a coach full time in the distant future. A lot of things I fund myself. I don't think that's all on the company, frankly. And there's so much stuff we can benefit from learning wise. I mean, it doesn't even cost a lot of money. Like, as a company, we have access to LinkedIn Learning, which gives you tens of thousands of courses, and no individual, this is a global level, it's funded, right? So nobody has to pay for that. You know, you can get on YouTube and learn something just like that. You know, I'm doing Hindi classes right now, which is killing me because it's a tough one, to finally try and get the Bombay Hindi out and get some proper Hindi in. And of course I'm paying for it myself, right? Because I should be. So I don't think there's any question of looking to the company and saying, you know, please pay for all of this for me. But yeah, I'm swimming in a sea of learning opportunities and I'm loving it, frankly.
Great. While a lot of people may have this option, a lot of people will still wait for the companies to, especially from an HR, they will still wait and need the companies to actually create programs for them.
And we do that for our people. We do that. I mean, this LinkedIn Learning thing I talked about, I mean, we're constantly telling people it's all there for you. And we've done a like league of the best learners, so we sort of recognize it a bit and showcase it and have some fun with it, and we actually select courses for people, and we made it part of our induction program and our confirmation program, that you're given a set of courses to do, and we recommend, and we also run our own training program. I'm doing leadership programs for people internally. I told you about the digital program, so we're actually providing it as well, right? Because people are also busy and stretched, and they don't have time to go into that zone of what is not urgent but important.
No, absolutely. I mean, ever since my first conversation with you, all the learning initiatives for everybody else in the organization, I've been hearing more and more about it. The main concern is, how does HR even start being selfish and say that, hey, am I learning? And what is it that I need to
Ask
learn?
my team. I think they're like also probably drowning in the learning pool as well, because I'm constantly getting them to do different fun things.
Right,
Yeah.
that's great. Second question that I have is, that has come to my table is, there's a lot of conversation about quota, or diversity percentage mandate, right? There's also this debate going on whether, just like at the directors level, that there should be certain number of women who should be there. Should we start creating this quota for companies also at all levels, right? While in some aspects, creating this quota system helps, it also has a lot of things that can backfire. So, what this person wants to know is, what are your thoughts on it?
So I am not in favor of quotas, generally speaking. I think they are more destructive than good. I think it sends the wrong signal. It says, look, we have to create mandates to get women in, instead of saying women are fantastic, they can do it themselves, right? I know that Norway did it. I think they had some mandate that 40% of board positions had to be women, maybe around about 2008, and it worked fantastically well. So but Scandinavia is a whole different kind of ballgame, right? I mean, they're very evolved and they're thinking very differently. So there's precedent to say it's worked in the world. But I think I would never want to positively discriminate, particularly when it comes to candidates. I would always want to have an equal playing field.
Mm-hmm.
If I would discriminate if I had two resumes as good as each other, as skilled as each other. I would probably go in the favor of the female hire, because I know that I have an imbalance in my company. But I would only do that if everything else was equal, right? I would want to make sure that I had equal everything else before I took that decision. But I think having quotas just makes the men resentful, and it doesn't feel right to me. It really doesn't feel right. I think what we need to do is recognize where our talented women lie in the organization. So we have a fantastic, particularly a middle belt of amazing women at your AVP, VP level, 8, 10, 12 years experience, a sort of mid to senior level, but fantastic women. So I can see, in providing they stick around, which I hope they will, and I'm sure they will, in the next 5 to 10 years, I can see things looking very different. I believe that there will be a really good balance of men and women at the top. Right now, it's a little bit skewed, but I can see that the seeds are being planted for that to come through. So I think it's about focusing on those women that we have, bringing amazing talent in, but not by saying these seats are closed for men. I think that's the wrong thing to do.
Fair enough. That's it from my end, Heather. This has been such a, I think, very enriching, and also a lot of practical insights for other HR leaders to take back to their organization, and then just keep identifying small things that they can put in as a seed, and then just wait for years down the line. The pipeline that you're talking about right now, the gender ratio that you're speaking of right now, is not something that is done overnight, that you decide today and tomorrow it's going to happen. So policies are important, process alignment is important, addressing bias at different levels is important, continuous conversation in a structured manner, well documented, so that you as a team can go back to it and analyze the trends of responses is important. Everything is there within the organization if you will just start talking to everyone. But
Communication is key, absolutely key.
For that, you need to make sure that people look at you as a leader, as a team, as HR, all together, an entity, a function where they can come and have transparent, non-judgmental conversations. And this is a journey. You don't just arrive there someday, and it's not going to end. Even today, you cannot. I doubt you will be able to say that we have arrived. There's a long way to go.
Absolutely, long way, but I think we've started in a powerful way, so that gives me confidence for the future.
Great. We will catch up with you again in future pretty soon then, Heather.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was really fun.
Take
Take
care,
care.
everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Bye bye.